And welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. I hope you can hear us okay. So I'm very pleased to be hosting this lunchtime discussion today. And I have three excellent speakers with me. It's an all-female panel today. And they will talk about their participatory action research for social justice, and we'll talk about its correlation with the open research agenda here at York. So as some of you probably already know, the University of York is committed to the long-term development of a research culture where open is the default. And the core idea behind open research is that all aspects of the research cycle should be shared and accessible where possible. And this means that we strive to embed a number of different values in the research process. So values such as accessibility, reusability, reproducibility, collaboration, and transparency. So those are some of the issues that we'll talk about today. So we will start with Smriti Safaya from the Stockholm Environment Institute. And she'll be followed by Anila Wenham from the School for Business and Society. And then last but not least, we have Ruth Kelly from Politics and International Relations. And each speaker will talk for a maximum of 15 minutes, leaving us with about 10 minutes for questions at the end. So if you do have any questions, please leave them for the end, or we certainly won't get to them until we get to the end of the third speaker. But I think that's all from me, and then we'll start with our first speaker. So, Smriti, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nina, and hi, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen and just let me know if it's all coming through okay.
Yeah, that's all good. We can see it.
All right, super. Thank you. So I'm Smriti Safai. I'm a postdoc fellow, and you can see so many acronyms across the bottom because I am definitely someone who's very nosy and likes to learn from a range of people across the university. So I have been sticking my nose into the education department, the environment geography department, SEI York, and also as part of ESAE. And what I wanted to share with you today is a little bit of what I've been learning as I've been dabbling in participatory action research, especially with youth, but also a little bit as I've been learning about what open research is. And so my talk today is about what can I learn here that I can learn nowhere else. I just wanted to give a brief background to how I've developed and thought about why that kind of research approach is important. And it started with me initially going down the route of being a geologist and an earth scientist looking at earthquakes in Tibet. And I realized that education was where it was at. So I became a school teacher, and I've been working as a school teacher for 13 years in Hong Kong, which is where I've mostly grown up. And then I decided to get into academia to basically answer a question about how experiential education could be quite effective as a tool for learning. But I found myself not fully fitting into academic research in terms of some of the conceptual abstract components, and I'm really about how to make change happen. So I don't know what kind of term that is, but I was thinking of catalyst researcher because I like to get things done. And through that journey, I'm a big fan of experiential education. Hence, I wear this t-shirt a lot when I'm out and about and do different kinds of talks, which is ask your teacher to take you outside, because there's a lot of good evidence that that is an amazing way to get people engaged and do good things for the planet and all its living beings. So I showed up to York a year and a half ago, and I started my postdoc fellowship here. And I noticed immediately that the place was so different from where I've been living for most of my life, which is Hong Kong. And the people are also new. So I was already very curious about who they are and what are the things that matter to them. And my goodness, like the campus is, I took this photo when, I mean, there's blue skies even today. So, you know, it could have been today, but this was taken, I think, pretty early on after I arrived. I was in shock though, because it was a 30-degree drop from where I'd been, but stunning. And so already I'm drawn to the campus, and I joke around a lot that I purposely leave a lot of time in between meetings across the different departments on campus so that I can enjoy the environment as I'm walking from one end to another. And I've even made some friends. So I'm quite enthralled by what already exists in the environment on campus, let alone Greater York. But at the same time, while I was thinking that, oh my gosh, there's just so much beautiful biodiversity, I'm hearing about these kinds of reports that the UK is one of the most nature depleted places on the planet, that 1 in 6 species are at risk of extinction, and also these calls about how you can't have sustainability without social justice or vice versa, and climate justice and social justice are really so intertwined and related. One of the things that also stood out for me was, especially like on this graph, or this diagram, sorry, not graph as much, is the purple, light purple bit that says data deficient for these particular groups of living beings. And I thought, wait a second, I know a way maybe to address that data deficiency in one small, tiny way, because I'd like to think that each person can still make a difference. And that's through citizen science. And some of you who may have heard me talk before, I speak about citizen science a lot because I find it to be one of the most incredible, flexible ways to engage the public in research. And so when we talk about open research, I think this is one of those really easy ways to do it. And there's a lot of projects out there. If people are interested in looking at aggregate sites like SciStarter or Zooniverse, there are so many different kinds of projects people can get involved in. And it's basically when the public contribute to doing real world research, and it can happen at totally different scales. So given my interest and love of the local biodiversity, iNaturalist is the go-to app that I use to help me identify and learn, because York biodiversity is so different to Hong Kong biodiversity. And I don't know if any of you, some of you I know have it because I see some familiar names in the participant list, but if you haven't yet downloaded it, it is such a worthy app to have on your phone and to learn about what's around you. And it's a really simple app to use. And even if you don't have a smartphone or don't want to use a smartphone, you can always use a camera and a website, because basically all you're doing is making an observation of a particular life form. So it can be any plant, animal, fungi, and your metadata about the time, date, and location gets automatically recorded. And especially if you're, for example, like in the middle here, you're taking a picture of a tree. 3 for a tree is a good way to do it, because you can take a picture of the leaf, the bark, and then the tree and maybe flowers in general, that you can hopefully identify what you are trying to, what you're looking at, basically, even if you don't know what it is. And in my case, coming to York, there was a lot of things I did not know. So I was using this "what did you see" function, which uses AI. And part of that is it can help narrow down my observation, but then what you see on the side here are little chat icons with numbers in them that basically say people around the world who are experts in identifying a particular species have weighed in and given a particular identification, whether they've agreed with me or disagreed with me and given something else. So that's how I slowly learn, because other people around the world are adding to my knowledge base. So it's an incredible learning tool to engage with other people. This is for York, sort of greater York boundary, the current biodiversity observations. So we have about 53,000, and that was from, I think, just a few days ago. So it can start to build a picture of what exists, and the different color icons are the different taxa. So birds, amphibians, fish, insects, flowers, plants, all that kind of range. And you can start to ask these place-based pedagogy questions like what, where, why there, why then, and why care. And I often come back to the why care, because I think ultimately what is the point of all this data. And I was just at a conference last week at the National Biodiversity Network Conference, where I heard someone say really wisely, without data, you are just a person with an opinion. So having this kind of data at your fingertips, and it's open access, is super powerful. And so when I and a small team organized the York City Nature Challenge earlier this year, we were able to work with so many different stakeholders across York, across all ages, as you can see in these photographs. And we were involved with students, with the City of York Council, with the Environment Agency, small scale grassroots groups like Friends of Roundtree Park or Friends of York Cemetery to larger, more regional organizations like the Wildlife Trust. And with such incredible involvement over those 4 days of this challenge, we were able to get almost 13,000 observations of almost 1,500 species across this area. So it begs the question then, what can we do with all this data? And on iNaturalist, which is a free platform, you can start to really dig into the data and use it for multiple purposes based on your needs. And you can search by day, time, particular taxa. It's an incredible resource, and it basically downloads as an XLS file, including with all the metadata of place, time. And that is extremely useful for organizations like these, who I'm currently engaging with to understand how have they used that data that we've been able to collect earlier this year, but also into the future, how do they want to use that data to make better decisions about conservation action locally? So whether it's a City of York Council or St. Nick's NGOs, or even here, which is a reference to our Biodiversity Action Plan and Sustainability Report at the university, all this data can be used quite effectively for improving our goals towards net zero or our biodiversity goals. So the potential is quite huge. On the heels of this, I was then invited to join a really, really small research team in Hull, where they were particularly interested in looking at how youth engage with nature in what they were saying is one of the most deprived areas in all of UK. And in particular, they were wanting to do it in a participatory approach. So I was working with young people who were also researching other young people and understanding what their barriers were to engage in nature. And sorry, that was my little timer. I've got 5 minutes left, I think. So the outcome from that so far has been a lot of engagements in wild camps, getting data by listening to the young people who attended. And the hope is to create a publication in open access journal and to be able to then use that on all those findings in their report to feed into the council in Hull, other NGOs that are doing great work to try to reduce those barriers to entry into nature, and even work with social workers and local organizations, but potentially even feed into policy. So that's been some really incredible work that I've been so privileged to be a part of. All of this actually stemmed from my work about 2-3 years ago in Hong Kong, where just off chance, I thought, let me try to work with some students and teachers who I had gotten in touch with a little bit when I was doing my PhD, and to understand the nature of climate change education and action in local schools and international schools in Hong Kong. And we were a small team, 12, actually maybe a big team rather, for especially the first time I was doing this. And I didn't even know the words participatory action research. So it was an incredible experience where we were just fumbling and learning how to do it. But really what we knew in our gut was we wanted to have a flat structure. So there was really no difference between students and teachers in this research group. We stayed as organized as possible and especially listened to how young people liked to communicate. And we also practiced an opt-out and opt-in approach, so that if there was any time any member of our research team wanted to say, actually, I can't do the work that I initially said I would, or yes, I would like to try new things, or we were just negotiating very, very honestly and helping each other out as much as possible. And it was an incredible experience, which even led to a publication, which was such a shock for us because we were quite surprised. Although if you notice, one gripe that we have is this particular publisher wouldn't write down our entire team's names because they said there was just too many names. And so they asked for some kind of group name, which ended up being Climate Change Education and Activism Research Team. So that's something that I've learned about when I'm trying to publish, is really check in with them early. Can you publish and give credit to absolutely everybody who was on this research team? That should be part of open research and transparency, and also giving due credit. But what this amazing research led to was projects by different groups and schools in our research team, where on the left-hand side you see a photo of a tidal flat, and a map representing it, which was an interdisciplinary, inter-year science communication project in the curriculum using citizen science biodiversity data to basically inform local conservation action by connecting with local district councillors. And then the project on the right-hand side about Zero Plastic League is a student-led inter-school initiative in Hong Kong to use education, citizen science, and research to really advocate to cut out plastic, especially single-use disposable plastic in Hong Kong, which is a huge, huge issue. So from all of these things, I've been really learning about how to do participatory action research well, especially realizing that it takes a long time. And one of the biggest things is that it takes time to build relationships and trust. And so especially when I was just new to York, I really relied on so many allies to be my bridges because I didn't have prior relationships. So this was a very important aspect of being able to really engage with people, understand their needs, and to create and co-create opportunities together. Another is this idea of just being very flexible about how people want to engage because there'll be a full range, and to try to use a co-benefit mindset whenever discussing where we can sort of give and take. I recognize as well that capacity development across the board for anybody involved was a really attractive part of engaging in participatory research. And a huge part is to be able to share transparently the outcomes and outputs so that they can be used into the future to make real change happen. So just wanted to say thank you very much for letting me share and happy to chat.
Great. Thank you so much, Mitzi. That was really, really fascinating. And I can see that Ben has been adding links in the chat, and some of you have already downloaded the app, and I think I'll definitely do the same once we finish here. So thanks so much for that. So Anila, you are next.
Can everyone see that okay?
I think it's coming on now. Yes, can see it now.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Smitri. That was a really interesting and fascinating presentation. And what I'm going to do today is give an overview of a research project I've been working on at the moment with my colleagues, Catherine Smith and Antonios Rumpakis, who are in the School for Business and Society. And the research project is titled Youth Geographies of Inequality. And what I'll focus on today is really how the research has incorporated participatory arts-based methods with young people, how this has helped enhance and kind of provide the mechanisms to work towards social justice, and then how this aligns to some of the issues around adopting open research practices. Oh. So the research project is essentially, it's titled Youth Geographies of Inequality. It's funded by the Health Foundation, and it is essentially interested in contemporary young people's lives. Within this, we're looking at the importance of emotional support to young people, but also how the importance of emotional support, the role this plays in young people's lives, is very much shaped by the wider economic, the social, cultural, and environmental factors, and how these various factors then impact upon a family's ability to provide emotional support to their younger members. And then within this kind of framework, we're kind of very much embedding this within a place-based approach to understanding social inequalities. So we're taking a case study approach, looking at the importance of localities, and we're very much aligned to our local communities. So we've got two communities that we've focused the research on. The first one is a rural coastal town, which is experiencing very high levels of social and economic deprivation. So this is Scarborough. And the second one is York itself, which many people know is a much more affluent city, however, that has hidden pockets of deprivation within this. And just to give you an overview of our research methods, this is, we kind of employed conventional qualitative methods. So we did 50 interviews with young people across Scarborough and York, semi-structured interviews. But we also very much embedded a whole host of creative and quite innovative research methods, arts-based methods with young people. And this involved a number of workshops with young people in York and Scarborough, involving activities such as mapping activities, walking interviews, zine making workshops, and a whole range of different craft-based activities. We also co-produced a film on the topic of emotional support with a participatory filmmaker. And then the research study also involved really kind of thinking about co-production and co-design with young people. So young people were actually co-researchers as an element of the research study. And this involved young people going out and interviewing people who represented the wider families. So kind of we really wanted to capture those intergenerational perspectives on understandings, experiences of emotional support and how families provide that. So I'm just going to give you an overview of those participatory and arts-based methods and how they really helped enhance kind of co-production and participation and kind of really foregrounded the voices of the young people. So what was really key to our design and kind of as what Smitri was kind of really highlighting was the time that we needed to invest in building relationships, engaging with key organisations and groups within our local communities, and how this was really integral to laying the foundations for the success of the participatory methods and our approach. And really this developed from a number of years of close working relationships with a whole range of different organisations in Scarborough and York. And this really enabled us to kind of hit the ground running in many respects. However, nevertheless, there's still a lot of time that you need to kind of invest in kind of building these relationships. So we worked with a whole range of youth and community groups across both locations, traditional youth clubs, as well as colleges and alternative education providers, and then also specialist youth groups who are maybe providing support to, say, young carers in the local community, as well as more kind of specialist provision around mental health support to some of the most vulnerable young people within both locations. And this involved kind of attending these sessions and allowing the young people to really get to know us, to build those relationships and build that trust, introducing a range of kind of creative activities, which allowed us to gradually introduce a project to them in quite a safe environment. And this picture is just an example of one of the first mapping exercises that we did with a group of young people in Scarborough. And again, it involved young people kind of looking at their feelings and their kind of experiences of their locality and attaching feelings and kind of emotions that they kind of felt towards various locations. And these could be good and these could be bad. And again, what was really important to us, especially if we're thinking about dissemination and the engagement of young people, is that we have these kind of visuals and this data that can be really powerful to represent these kind of core themes from the research, that these can be shared across a number of audiences, and in many ways were much more accessible to more traditional research outputs such as journal articles and research reports and so on. We also, again, thinking about how we approach these participatory methods and kind of the more innovative and creative arts-based methods, after engaging with groups and building those relationships, as well as doing the individual semi-structured interviews, we worked with youth and community groups to design a series of sessions that involved creative participatory approaches to research. And this was very much guided by the young people themselves. So again, it was very much about building time and relationships to understand what would work and what wouldn't. And this inevitably involved a whole range of different activities. So there's a picture here of a female model made in one creative session. We did zine making workshops where young people made kind of magazines. And then these are kind of pictures from York and Scarborough of a number of sessions where we would go out into the localities with young people and walk with them and essentially do walk-in interviews and kind of capture their locations and feelings towards that. So we kind of really built into our research design a lot of time again, and it really does take time to kind of do this meaningfully, and sometimes this can be really difficult in funded research projects. And again, one of the key reflections from our experience of this type of work is you really need to kind of embed that in and make sure you have adequate time to do these types of activities. And whilst we placed young people's input very much at the centre of designing the initial creative sessions that we ran that I've just outlined, we also wanted to purposefully include activities that were participatory by design. And we suggested to the groups the idea of running a series of participatory film making workshops, and all of the young people were really interested in doing this. We wanted to ensure, that actually we had the appropriate expertise in filmmaking. So we worked with a professional filmmaker from the School of Arts and Creative Technologies. Her name's Simona Mani, and she had a range of experience working on previous participatory projects on the topic of mental health and emotional support. So it was really key to us, really important that we have individuals who align to the ethos and the principles of our participatory approach, and someone that we could trust to go into these sessions and work with young people in the way that we envisaged and we kind of built in. And again, these workshops involved a combination of capturing footage in the locations, working together in creative sessions to design the films. And these photos here just very much kind of show how young people developed their ideas, how they created narratives for the films during the workshops. It was interesting because we had two different approaches. One group wanted to do all of this participatory work on Zoom, and the other group wanted very much to do this kind of face-to-face in person during sessions. And again, it's really important that, we have individuals that we can work with, arts-based participatory people who have the skills to do this effectively. And actually it can be really hard to find those individuals and build that trust and know who to turn to. Finally, a further way we ensured that young people's participation in our project was participatory and kind of was really kind of building in those kind of co-produced features was an element of the project which involved young people being co-researchers themselves. So they were essentially members of our research team. So young co-researchers became members of the research team. They were involved in a series of interviews with people from older generations. So these are people who are representative of family members in order for us as a study to understand older generations' conceptions of providing emotional support to young people. So again, it was really building in that intergenerational perspective through young people as co-researchers doing this element of the research. In order to do this effectively, we had to provide training for young co-researchers. We ran a day on campus in York, and we also ran a training day in a library in Scarborough to help young people familiarise themselves with conducting qualitative interviews, as well as understanding the ethical issues surrounding research. And on this day, again, we also involved the young people in designing the topic guide for the research, ensuring that their input was there in relation to the interview questions, that we were asking the right interview questions from their perspective as well. We arranged the interviews with adults, but we accompanied the young co-researchers to conduct the interviews with them, providing support throughout. And it was really important, and there's lots of ethical issues attached to this, that we ensured this was a positive experience for all of the young people involved, that we debriefed the young co-researchers, provide that encouragement, provide that feedback. That it was important that they were also paid for their time. And again, this is quite generous to kind of, really reflect that input and that work that's involved. And they were also involved in the analysis of the interview data collected as well. And there's a picture here which kind of just shows a mind mapping exercise of how we went about that. I don't really have time to do this, but what we do have a project website, and this shows a series of the participatory films that we conducted with young people. So I'd really encourage you to go and have a look at this. And really, the aim of this is to essentially have young people's voices foregrounded, so they can showcase to local policymakers and so on the issues within their locality that are really important to them. So kind of, again, working towards the social justice agenda. And again, we're kind of using these kind of these films and all of the outputs from the research to engage practitioners and policymakers, and also wider members of the local community, to understand the importance of locality, social inequalities, people and places, and emotional support to young people. And there's another film there. Again, we'll provide links to the website, so you can kind of have a look at this in your own time. And it's a film from young people in York. And then finally, just kind of reflecting upon what Neela described at the beginning, we've got a website attached to the project, and it's really important to us that we've documented the process of how we've conducted these participatory methods. So this is just a screen grab of a section. You can see I've highlighted the section around what we've termed storytelling. And this basically outlines all the workshops, the videos, the mapping exercises, and it's just a continuous blog of how we went about this process on a week-by-week basis. So it's kind of really useful for people who are interested in these methods, as well as kind of, useful for practitioners and policymakers to understand how they might go about doing something similar as well. So there's just the title there of the project. So I think that's everything for now, and I'm just, look forward to hearing people's questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neela. That was excellent. And I can see Ben has put a link to the project website in the chat, and I'll definitely make sure to have a look at that afterwards as well. Okay, thank you. Right. Oh, and I can also see actually that Simona Mani, the filmmaker in the project that you mentioned, she's with us here today attending as well. Good. Okay, so got our final speaker now. So Ruth, the floor is yours. The virtual floor, that's the one.
Thank you, Nina. So I don't have any slides, so hopefully you'll be able to follow along as I work through my presentation. I'm actually going to be talking about something that hopefully will be complementary to what Smriti and Yada talked about. This presentation kind of builds on our experience doing participatory work with activists and artists around the world. I've put a link to that in the chat if you're interested to hear more. But today, what I'm going to be focusing on is how we as a university can become better at nurturing the kind of partnerships and relationships that both Smriti and Inyala were talking about, and that we've experienced in our own work as well. So as they both pointed out, nurturing these relationships and like building trust can take time, and it can be very difficult in the context of funded research projects or cycles. And so over the past year, I've been working with a group of academics and professional support colleagues to think carefully about how we could better support more transparent and more equitable partnerships to research in the University of York. And the work I'm doing, the presentation today, is hugely indebted to this work and to the work and experience of many colleagues across the university. So especially to Pippa Cooper, who's here in the audience, and also work I did with Joel Baker in the impact team, Maria Franco Gavanel in Business and Society, School for Business and Society, and others. So, of course, in York, many university partnerships are really large scale, so maybe with industry, with government, with other universities. But as the presentations so far have so well illustrated, many of our research agendas are significantly enhanced by these smaller scale partnerships with grassroots groups, networks, individuals, non-profit organisations. But at the moment, the way that university policies and processes are set up can create obstacles to making these partnerships as open and as transparent and as equitable as they could be. And this is definitely not just a challenge for the University of York. It's something that universities across the UK are struggling with and increasingly prioritising. And this is partly prompted by a really huge investment that the Wellcome Trust have made in research into kind of these processes and procedures over the past couple of years. This is also, as well as kind of looking towards solutions, it's highlighted some recurring problems. So just a couple of examples. We've heard stories of organisations that say that they would, around the world, who say that they'd never work with universities in the UK again because of lengthy delays with payments or demands that are inappropriate or that are difficult to understand, or other problems that have arisen in the context of the research relationship. And at many universities, obstacles to paying research partners in a timely manner means that staff feel a moral obligation to come up with kind of different solutions, which might not be ideal. For example, traveling overseas with large cash advances to pay collaborators or paying participants out of their own pockets. So this is a challenge that kind of needs to be addressed both from the side of the partners and from the side of making sure that our staff are really well equipped to do this work. And the University of York is currently doing a lot of work to review processes to see how we can make those more open, more equitable. As well as the open research agenda that Nina referenced, the Valuing Voices for Equitable and Responsible Research project is a big investment that the university is making into creating principles and tools to help researchers and support staff to plan, deliver, evaluate research with equity and responsibility at its core. So as part of this project, the Valuing Voices project, the BRIC team, so Megan McLaughlin and others, are developing kind of a toolkit with 10 principles. And the first principle, appropriateness, emphasizes that research processes need to fit the context, the political, economic, or social context and needs of the beneficiaries or participants involved. So we've had, over the past year, as I said, lots of in-depth conversations with colleagues from across the university with considerable expertise in this area. And we've come up with a number of recommendations for how, where we would need to put attention in the future. And we feel that over the next decade, we need to become better at supporting researchers and bigger research teams to establish and nurture partnerships with a more diverse range of organizations, networks, individuals that can help advance our research agendas. And in order to really work for the kind of participatory approaches that were being described, these partnerships with kind of smaller scale partnerships need to enable co-construction of research, so focusing on involving participants in the design and analysis of research as well as in data collection. They need to be understood as research partnerships, so that they're not just service delivery. It's not just that you're working with a partner to deliver an agenda, but that they are exploratory, experimental, open-ended partnerships, and that they need to understand to extend beyond the scope of funded project periods, both in terms of building the relationship and in terms of maintaining that relationship once project funding has disappeared. So I'll come back to these recommendations in a couple of minutes, but I thought it'd be useful just to turn to the bigger picture of why supporting equitable partnerships matters, and the case that we can make for this. And there is this huge growing interest in participatory, collaborative, co-created approaches to research, but very often research that claims to do that can still be quite extractive. It's really difficult to design projects that are so effective at integrating participants in the way that Smriti and Yella have already described. And very often projects are called co-constructed, but really the extent to which they are might be questionable. But there are openings for changing this, so shifts in thinking about impact, for example, in the new REF cycle, where we're thinking about impact as team-oriented, building on long-term collaborations, not just single partnerships, valuing engagement as well as impact. These kind of moves may create space for reimagining partnerships beyond a fixed project cycle. And there's lots of good reasons for investing time in developing equitable and transparent partnerships. So some of those that we have come up with is that emerging challenges needs knowledge from different perspectives. Both practitioners and communities that have been marginalized can bring valuable insights, and without those insights, the responses to these challenges will be inadequate. Also, in order to develop really effective impact agendas, involving partners as co-researchers from the project design phase is really effective. It's not just important to ensure more effective impact in the real world, but also to help with attribution so that we can actually connect impact activities to the research more effectively, to tell a really good story for REF. Funders are also increasingly requiring research to be more collaborative, and there are some funders that will only give consortia grants if they are led by non-academic partners like community organisations. So this is happening among charitable funders like Lloyd's, but I've also seen it in some government funding. And kind of one of the biggest reasons I think that has come out of our work and our projects and the more critical literature in this area is that very often UK university community partnerships and North-South university partnerships are set up in ways that reproduce colonial legacies, or kind of structural dynamics of inequality within the society that we're embedded within. And this has been a particular area of critique in international development research. And there's been a huge amount of work done over the past 10 years to address these inequalities. Some of the critiques include that the partnerships involve like discrete time-limited research projects just to achieve really short-term policy or practice change that doesn't really underpin the kind of sustained longer term partnerships that are necessary for achieving really transformative change and sustaining that over time. This kind of critical literature on the problem with North-South partnerships and the ways that they reproduce colonial dynamics has informed new UK RI policy on good governance and ethical practice in working with partners. So they say research outside the UK and in resource-poor settings should be based on equitable partnerships which are transparent, of mutual respect, and deliver mutual benefits. Some things that the others touched upon in their presentations about research here in the UK too. This can be very, very difficult in the context of challenges with policies and processes that don't enable this. So a research team in Bristol, for example, highlighted that the kind of bureaucracy and ways of thinking about risk generated lots of obstacles, delays, and disappointments in their collaborative research with non-academic partners in Colombia, and that the partners felt that these delays, obstacles, disappointments were kind of part of a colonial dynamic that undermined the trust that those partners had in that relationship. There's another piece by early career researchers, Haney and Poliquet, who worked both in the UK and in Sierra Leone, and found that the more mundane aspects of kind of conducting research, like making payments, can make it really difficult and even impossible to undertake engaged research of the kind that has been described today. This is true across so many different universities across the UK, where they've had problems with due diligence, with contracts, with payments that just undermine trust between the researchers and their partners. So based on extensive experience and expertise and so many consultations, PIPA has developed a set of guidelines that offer advice to research and support staff on how we can follow internal processes, but also consider how staff can act as intermediaries between non-academic partners and university departments to help those partners navigate these different processes and ensure that partnerships are more equitable. So some examples for how this could work. The Policy, Integrity and Performance team here at York a couple of years ago recommended that instead of having kind of a technical approach to due diligence and compliance, we start these partnerships with a welcome letter where both researchers and research partners are given a friendly and accessible expectation of what's expected, what the requirements are, and that this would help to sustain the relationship and also improve compliance. So these kind of changes that are needed to support the kind of excellent participatory work that's been described are really practical. So they suggest changes in terms of workloads, in terms of celebrating partnership development, even when it doesn't result in a grant, in terms of thinking about putting in place arrangements to pay partners in advance for the work they're going to do rather than pay them 3 months in arrears. And in order to enable these kind of very practical and concrete changes, one of the things that we recommended as part of this process and as part of the report that PIPA developed is that research staff should be equipped to develop really good working relationships with central services teams, but also to budget for the time of kind of a relationships manager within their projects, so that that person should be knowledgeable about and able to navigate both internal university procedures and the really important work of developing and building trust and maintaining the relationships with the partners that we're working with. And of course, all of this requires work across teams to address across researchers, across professional support teams, and across other people involved in research to make sure that our policies and processes can best underpin really effective work of the kind that Shmurti and Angela were describing, and of the kind that we were doing with artists and activists around the world. And as I said, you can find out more about that through the link. And if anyone wants the report, it's ready for circulation now, so just send me an email and we can make sure you get it.
Thank you so much, Ruth, for these really insightful recommendations. And I can see in the chat that PIPA is offering to send the document to Ben, who can then circulate it to everyone, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of interest in that. So thanks to all our speakers for sharing your really important and innovative research, and it was really inspiring to hear both about the benefits but also some of the challenges of participatory research. I've certainly learned a lot from this. We have all of 9 minutes left, so we should have time for a few questions if there are any. So there is a Q&A function if anyone has any questions.
There's just a question in the chat from Hannah Gray as well, Nina.
Oh, yeah. Let me just find that. So it's a question for you, Ruth. So what do you think about this approach where the community set the expectations and it's for the researchers to agree to meet them?
So I think that this can work for some research. So they've done amazing work in Durham to look at, for example, environmental research around river pollution, where the priorities were set by the farmers and communities involved. And then the researchers just came in and did whatever they could. So actually the research wasn't participatory. It was that the approach was participatory, and then the community commissioned the researchers to do kind of quantitative data analysis, right? So, and then the community and the farmers were involved in reviewing kind of the data and interpreting it and deciding on recommendations. I think that's a really effective approach, and I think is the approach that I really like in terms of doing participatory research, that you might not use participatory tools, you might, but you might not. The most important thing is thinking about who decides on the direction of the research. This can sometimes be very difficult to get funding for. But the other thing that I think that's interesting about the Science K approach, and this is just a gesture to my substantive work, is the importance of different modes of communication. So that different cultural forms might be really powerful for getting different communities to engage in and break down barriers and kind of think about where maybe there's defensiveness and break down defensiveness. So techniques like storytelling might be really effective in building trust and building collaborations, whether or not you use it as a data collection tool.
Great, thanks, Ruth. So I've got another question for you, Ruth, which is in the Q&A. So from Camilla, who's saying, I was wondering how to manage participatory research principles with the university ethical requirements. I find that these ethical requirements, including in terms of contacting and establishing partnership with research participants, seem very conservative and not very conducive to collaboration.
So it's a really interesting question, and I might kind of bring it together with Simona's question as well on anonymity and vulnerability that is just dropped in the Q&A for people who can see it. So I think that there's this is something we've talked about a lot among artists and human rights workers. They don't like ethics, right? So they like kind of going in and doing research and taking risks, whatever. And then there's the university can be very, very conservative in terms of ethical requirements, and also sometimes ethical requirements. For example, there has in the past been universities that have said that it's unethical to pay participants for their time, the kind of thing that Aniela said was so important in the project that you were doing. So there can be a mismatch both between practitioner kind of inclination, university requirements, and then whether or not that actually supports ethical engagement with individuals. So I think that there's a lot of discussion happening about what really good ethics procedure would look like. Rebecca Tapscott was leading a project on this before she went to Glasgow about how, and I guess one really good example of this, of how to do ethics well and how to navigate ethics well, is in some of the amazing participatory work that's been done in the University of York. So, for example, Mary Lang's work in collaboration on kind of sex work and human rights in collaboration with sex workers' own organisation. They've had to navigate ethical dilemmas right across the project, and so they have really good guidance on how to navigate these different processes. And sometimes it's just about knowing what other people have done before, knowing how to talk really well to your ethics officer, and then kind of knowing how to write that up in an effective way in your ethics form. And I know that I didn't manage to do that for my PhD, so I probably provided too much information, and it's kind of a bit of a navigation. So I guess that's what I mean by developing really good working relationships with our support colleagues, to know not only what the requirements are, but to understand better why those requirements are in place, and then to be able to kind of understand what is the scope for manoeuvre within these processes. as well as the underpinning work to actually work to change those processes to make them more flexible and more appropriate for the kind of project that I know Camilla is doing in Brazil. So yes, there are issues around anonymity and vulnerability. Sometimes work, especially in kind of human rights work, social justice work, can create problems around that. And so that's what those ethical processes, I think, try to help us with. It's just sometimes maybe they go a little bit too far. So that was a bit of a vague answer. But...
No, I think you covered it. But I'd like to ask Anila and Smriti as well if that's something that they've come across. But also, I'm not sure if related, but another question that Smriti, that you've put in the chat is about funders and whether funders are, how willing they are to support this research. So Ruth, you mentioned that UKRI, they're certainly talking about equitable partnerships, but are they actually willing to give it the support that it needs? So I don't know who wants to comment on any of that.
Yeah. Just kind of leading on from the vulnerability angle and anonymity. I think that's a really difficult one. So not this project which I shared with you today, but I have done qualitative longitudinal research, and that has involved some quite difficult conversations and honesty around how much you are willing to share of somebody's story, especially if that's built up over time, and what might be the implications of that. And the longitudinal framework has enabled me to kind of go back and have those conversations with participants. And actually, there have been situations where information and kind of full disclosure wanted to be provided, but then retrospectively and kind of, looking back, people were like, I'm really glad I didn't do that. So I think it's about having those kind of honest and careful conversations around what might be the implications of this, not just now, but further down the line for research participants. Are funders willing to kind of build in time? I think it's difficult to know, because I suppose if you do build in that time, your research project grant might not be successful. We don't really know. We're not really given information as to why necessarily that's the case. I think too much time probably would be a disadvantage, if I'm honest. So, time is just critical to these kind of research projects and this type of research being successful. So it needs to be there. And I think you've definitely got an advantage if you've already built those relationships and you can hit the ground running. But I think if you make a strong case, then that kind of if it sits right with a funder, they should fund it. So I don't see it as necessarily being a huge obstacle, shall we say. It's how that's framed and built into your research design.
Thank you. Okay. And Smriti?
Oh gosh, I don't think I really have much to add because I'm such a newbie in academia and research. So I feel like I'm just learning from the likes of Anila and Ruth right here with their incredible experience. So I think basically do what they said. It would be my ending message and learn from all these amazing resources. I think each time I'm just finding that so much work has been done and we're standing on, the shoulders of giants before us. And even right now that I think one of the hardest things maybe as a new researcher is knowing where to look and finding these resources to be able to, in a way, get a jump start and already learn from everybody else's experiences to be able to do participatory research better or to do open research better. So I don't know, as everyone's been sharing links, I've been adding them as favorites into my places just now. But I wonder, how else to be able to access this in a little bit more of a simpler platform so that new researchers can tap into this work really, really quickly.
And well, thanks so much. Well, we are unfortunately out of time, but I've learned so much from all three of you. So I've really enjoyed this session, and wish we could continue a bit longer. But we said an hour, so we probably should finish now. But there will be other open research discussion events this academic session. So Lukman has put in a link in the chat, so do have a look at those. And thanks so much also both to Lukman and Ben for organising this. It's much appreciated. So I hope you enjoyed it, and hope to see you for some further open research discussions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Take
Thanks
care.
so much. Take care.
Until next time.
Thank you, everyone. Bye bye. Thanks for
Bye.
coming.